In this episode of the Luminous Arts, I talked with Mark Slee, the developer of the software behind the Tree of Tenere. He's an accomplished producer and a light artist who runs a gallery out of San Francisco. We're both quarantined in separate corners of the world due to the coronavirus, with Mark in Montreal and me in the British Virgin Islands. Fortunately, remote podcasting is a thing, and our connection was solid, so hopefully it'll sound pretty good. We talk about the role of art in different parts of the world, how he became involved with Symmetry Labs, and how he developed his software, among other things. I've been looking forward to talking with Mark for a long time, as he's a prolific artist in the Bay Area community and the light art scene. He's a cool guy, and it's a really good conversation. I think you'll dig it. I'll start. Yeah. So you're in Montreal right now?
That's right. Yeah, I'm in Montreal with my wife at her family home, just hanging here with her parents, doing the self-isolating thing.
Yeah, man. It's crazy times. And you came down from Amsterdam.
That's right. Yeah, we had been living in Amsterdam for about the last 6 months or so. And yeah, making our way gradually back to San Francisco at the moment.
Oh, that's cool. What were you doing in Amsterdam?
Kind of just a change of pace, mix of things. My wife took a design gig with a fashion designer actually out there named Iris van Herpen. My wife's actually an architect, but she did that as kind of change of pace. And for me, I was mostly focused actually on music production while out there, but doing a bit of programming work as well. But yeah, basically we'd just been living in San Francisco for quite a while and wanted to do the whole live abroad thing, have a different experience for a while before we grow up, have kids, and these things get harder to do.
Yeah, man. I find that there's a balance, a balance between living in San Francisco and traveling outside of San Francisco. And for me, it's about 30%. If I can spend 30% of the year outside San Francisco, then the remaining 70% spent in San Francisco doesn't feel as mundane. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's there's great things about San Francisco, but it's definitely a bit of more one track mind city. So I definitely find it super refreshing. Yeah.
It's a weird place.
Yeah.
The more you travel, the more you're like, wow, San Francisco is you just start to really see it for more an abstract way, more like a high level view instead of just being fully down in it. It's hard to really see your surroundings when you're in the weeds.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, definitely have a similar experience almost every time I go somewhere else.
Do you travel outside the US a lot?
No, I mean, yes, in general, not in a sort of specific way. But we usually at least once a year we'll take some sort of trip. My family actually is English. My parents came over in the 70s, so even as a kid, we would be all my aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone are majority still in England. So I do end up in Europe a fair bit just to see them, and then usually creating a trip out of it. And the same for my wife. She's Canadian, grew up in Montreal, but her grandmother also grew up in Austria and still spent some family time back there. So we pretty frequently do end up, yeah.
That's cool. Your last name makes a lot more sense to me now.
It's Scottish, apparently. Slee. Yeah, I don't know.
Is it? That's funny. I'm Scottish too.
Really?
That's my heritage. Yeah.
Nice.
It's funny. My grandma, she was very dead set against being Scottish. Right. She was kind of racist against Scots, but her last name is McBurney. It was always like this weird thing where it was like, come on, Grandma, you're Scottish. She's
did
like, no,
she know
I'm
she
not
was Scottish, or did she not think she was Scottish?
I don't know, man. Honestly, I have no idea. People get weird neuroses, and everybody's got weird issues with self-identity,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was just one of her things, and I don't understand it, but whatever.
To each her own.
Exactly. Well, Amsterdam's not a bad place, man. You're doing music over there?
Yeah, no, we had a fantastic time. The quality of life in Amsterdam is just incredible. The cycling, and it was actually really interesting to compare to San Francisco in some ways, because they're extremely different cities, obviously, but they're about the same population. Actually, Amsterdam's also just a little bit under, right around 1 million people.
Yeah.
But it feels the ability to sort of approach the city with the cycling is just so easy. You feel like you can get to know it very quickly and get around pretty quickly. But the other thing that's just incredible there is the density of cultural stuff happening, the number of music festivals, the number of art festivals, art museums. We just enjoyed incredibly having there be an abundance of stuff to go see. And I think it was sort of one of the ironies too, actually coming from San Francisco, where there is, on the type of stuff we do, Burning Man and technological art and whatnot. But I actually felt like we were able to find and experience just as much, if not actually a lot more of that out there, just through the sort of just more of the kind of like public art ecosystem that they have there. So that
Well,
was
I think
great.
that's not unique to Amsterdam. That's a European
For
thing,
sure,
you know.
for
And
sure, yeah.
the more time I spend in Europe, the more I understand European culture. And when you meet people from Europe, it's a very different outlook on life, and it's a very different outlook on society and culture and and capitalism, even, you know, or the way like that society is structured. And I think a lot of that has to do with fundamental values, of which art is. It's so rooted in European culture and society. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah,
it's
for sure.
in the United States. It's like a the art scene is underground. You know, it's a very counterculture. There's still a lot of art, but it's counterculture art. Whereas in Europe, the art is it's more structured. You know, it's part of the fabric that makes up the civil society. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that's something what you were saying about counterculture rings very true. It was one of the things I actually really appreciate being in Europe is I do find that in the Bay Area, at least, and probably most of the US, yeah, it is sort of participation in sort of more modern or avant-garde art is often, yeah, a big sort of a statement of identity or rebellion or a sort of an expression that you're a weird or unique or interesting person. And you tend to find that, there's often then will be style choices and fashions that go along with that. And you go to some of these events in the States and you have that feeling of like, oh, here's like, the group of weird people that are into this stuff. And one of the things I actually really appreciated in Europe is you would go to an art festival where the art was equally avant-garde and modern and innovative and challenging, but the environment felt to me in a refreshing way incredibly normal that I really appreciated because I'm obviously super passionate about this stuff and love it. But I kind of preferred experiencing an environment that reinforced that it's a valuable, normal thing to be interested in. And of course, a bunch of just regular people from town are going to come check it out because why wouldn't they? It's interesting. And sort of as you described, just sort of a normal part of life to go to an arts festival or something, see what someone's creating. Um, which, yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely appreciated the contrast where I often don't feel that exactly as you described in San Francisco. It often feels like this big weird underground thing, which has its own allure, and I'm obviously
Well, that's like the source of the river. You know, if you think about it like a river, it's like, you know, the river of culture that's flowing through a society. Then, you know, the source of the river, like the source of the river in Europe, it's more like institutional. Not to say that there's not underground and you know, like the festival scene in Europe is huge. But I think that there's like a lot more funding, for example, that comes from institutions in Europe that encourages people, that allows artists to make a living, and it affects the vibe. You know, it affects how art expresses itself.
yeah, absolutely. No, I definitely agree, and I think it seems to be a strong relationship they've formed between, as you say, larger established institutions providing funding, but still being very comfortable, seemingly taking creative risks or using that funding to, yeah, basically enable people to go try things, some of which are going to succeed, many of which are not going to succeed, but that's fine, just sort of part of the process.
Yeah. Well, there's also like a freneticism, or like it's like frenetic here. It's more of a There's more of a sense of urgency, because if your art does not succeed, then you can't make a living. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's in Europe, there's a lot more artists who are just like, yeah, we're artists. You know, that's what we do. And in the U.S., it's like you have to have a hustle.
Right.
You have
Yeah.
to
I
have
was going
some
to
kind
bring
of
up that
trick
exact
or
word, hustle. Everything is always a hustle. And yeah.
yeah. And you know, you can debate the pros and cons of that, but it's interesting to look at the differences that produces in like the stream, or you know, like the stream of art, how that river flows. It's like it's very much affected by yeah, the source of funding, and like how people can exist inside that as a career.
Yeah, for sure. No, I like that. I like that metaphor.
You know, it was really interesting when I was in Berlin. I went, you know, White Void. Do you know who those guys are?
Hmm.
Yeah, they had Christopher Bowder. Actually, he's like the founder of that company or group or whatever. He had an art exhibit. It was an exhibition of this visual piece that he had created with his group, and they had it in this abandoned train station, and it was this massive building, but it was well publicized. It was you know like a it was there were flyers all over the place, and it blew my mind how many people showed up for the event, because it was like a strictly like a visual event, but they sold it out for multiple nights. And it made me realize, like, wow, there's really a market in Europe for visual arts. The same way that you might go see a concert, you know, the same number of people were coming out for this thing, and it was a visual installation piece. I was like, wow, that's cool.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I know the piece you're talking about. We were fortunate actually. They toured it to Amsterdam and presented it there in a
With the
similar.
mirrors,
Yeah,
like the
exactly. What was it
yeah,
called? Scalar, right? With
scalar,
and I
yeah,
think
yeah.
the music was with Kandang Ray, if I'm getting the name right. But yeah, no, I had the exact same experience with that. It was held in Amsterdam. There's a venue called the Gashouder, which is like a big old used to be a gas containing building, I guess, but where they have now all sorts of different often will be rented out for art expos or all sorts of different events. But same thing, they had a run which I think went for over a month, and with quite a few of many of the dates were sold out, and this is probably I think close to nearly 5,000 people or something. And I had the same
Yeah.
reaction where I was just sort of mystified in a good way. I was like, this is incredible that
It's
there's
like,
this
wow.
much interest and
Yeah.
demand, people to come check this out. And same as you said, it's like the banners and the advertising for it were just sort of up around town as a sort of just like, yeah, of course, this would be a totally normal thing for people to be interested in and come check out. Why wouldn't they? It's and it was an incredibly cool performance. And I was also just mystified by, I was trying to wrap my head around, like, how did the tech writer work for this, and how do
Yeah.
you
To
install this
tour
in a
something
place?
like that is something else. I mean,
Right. I
you
don't know
couldn't
if they
do it.
brought the equipment or if they just rented it all in Amsterdam or something, because it's just an incredible amount of hardware. So.
Well, you know, their whole thing is the motors, the controllable motor
Hmm.
array. So I think they must have brought that. They must have. They must have
Yeah.
brought their set, you know, like the mirrors. Maybe they could have gotten the moving lights
Right. Yeah. There was a
locally,
lot of
but
moving heads.
yeah, it was a beautiful piece though, man. He's a badass. He's a real cool guy. I run into him occasionally at LDI and some of the conferences, like the show production conferences,
Hmm.
and yeah, it's fun. He's a cool guy to talk to. So when you were over there, did you uh, work on any visual art, or was it strictly music?
I was mostly focused on music. I've been passively working a bit on art. I'm kind of always iterating on my on that sort of LX framework for the LED stuff. And we are actually continuing to work on a new edition of the Tree of Tenere, which we're doing in collaboration actually with a Dutch studio called Studio Drift, that had collaborated with us a bit on the piece at Burning Man. And they're based in Amsterdam as well, actually. So spent a little bit of time working with them on that. Though that's mostly been in hardware stages at the moment. I tend to focus on the software side. So
So what is Studio Drift? How did that tie in with the Tree of Tenere?
Yeah, Studio Drift's. I mean, they're an art studio based out of Amsterdam. That they've been making art. I mean, for over a decade at this point. Most of which kind of combines um, organic and digital elements. So we had just reached out to them when we were working on Tenere for Burning Man. Zach, who initiated the Tenere project and led it, I think he'd met one of the drift people, I forget where, just out and about somewhere. And he was familiar with their art, and as were the rest of us. So we'd kind of just pinged them and said, hey, this is kind of probably maybe up your guys' alley. It's kind of doing this digital organic thing. So they'd contributed a bit, adapted some programming that they had done
Were
previously.
they mostly the software end, or just, I
Um,
guess, actually, before we get into this too deeply, for people who don't know what the Tree of Tenere, I always call it Tenere, but I guess it's Tenere. It was a huge digital light sculpture that premiered at Burning Man in 2018, 19.
2017, actually, I want to say, if I'm getting that right. Yeah, I think it was 2017.
Wow. All right.
Time
And
flies.
it was like a volumetric. The leaves were all LED, and it was a huge kind of like volumetric cloud of pixels. But it looked like a real tree. It was very realistic. It was beautiful, and it's since blown up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, full size tree. I forget the exact dimensions. I want to say it was between 30 and 40 feet tall. And yeah, every leaf was molded with LEDs inside of it, all of which were addressable. I forget what we exactly ended up with, somewhere between probably 100 and 125,000 distinct LEDs. Um,
Wow.
yeah, which
Wow.
was super fun.
So Studio Drift, who did the hardware? I was very
The
very curious to know what groups participated in what capacities in that project.
Yeah, it's a huge mix of people. The project was initiated by this guy Zachary Smith, who's from San Francisco. He kind of had this concept, went around, built the team. Symmetry Labs was involved. They did a lot of the hardware design. I did most of the animation software using my LX Studio framework. There's a company called Nature Maker that did the fabrication of the tree structure itself. They don't do any electronics, but they have a long history of building very realistic artificial trees for all sorts of, for whether it's theme parks or shopping malls, this type of thing.
That thing looks like a movie prop, man. It almost looks like
Yeah, that company,
it could
they're
be like
really
taken
cool.
right out of the Muppets, or
They're
some
down in
some.
Southern California, and they just have this crazy warehouse down there that it reminded me. I don't know if you've watched Westworld,
Oh
but
yeah,
there's these
yeah.
scenes where there's just these like rows of fake human beings, but that are super realistic. And I had the same like uncanny experience down there. You walk into these guys' warehouse, and it's just these rows of trees that are in various states of
I thought you were gonna say like human-looking robots. I was like, wow, creepy.
no, oh no, not at all. It was more though that you would see like, oh, that tree is still clearly just some pieces of metal, but then this one on the other end looks completely realistic now, and you'd kind of see the stages being worked through. But
Wow, something for everybody, right? It's like we just specialize in making trees.
yeah,
Company for everything.
I forget the exact details, but the backstory was very funny. The guy who started the company was kind of just this artist, and he'd started doing that somehow, and then just kind of, I guess, sort of stumbled into this, actually existing market demand for that type of thing, and ended up growing a whole business just around that. But they have a very cool. It was very cool to see their process, which is still very not super automated. Still a lot of just weird mixtures of goops and paints and resins,
So
mostly
that's
still applied by hand that they just figure out.
is it like, what is the material? Is it like a rubber that makes the trunk
No,
and
the
the?
inside is steel. They use steel tubing that they'll weld together for the core frame, but then yeah, they'll apply. I don't even know the exact mix of ingredients, but they'll put a sort of mesh over that then they adhere this mixture of like resin and paint. Um,
Yeah, because I remember people were climbing it on Playa.
Yeah, until we unfortunately had to restrict that because one too many crazy people were perhaps climbing it slightly too quickly and too far up it in Burning Man states of mind. And
At
yeah, I
Burning
think
Man? No way. That's crazy.
yeah, unbelievable.
Yeah. So that's cool. And you started working with Symmetry, that collaboration from the beginning. Yeah, you were part of that the tree project from the start.
I joined the tree sort of in the middle when Zach had first come to me. I'd met with him. I forget. It was probably the year before. It might have even been like December 2016 or something. And at first, actually, I thought he was crazy. He was like, "We're going to do this many LEDs," and the concept was a bit crazier at the beginning, where the leaves were gonna it was all gonna be wireless, and each leaf was gonna be solar powered, and there's gonna be some kind of blockchain thing between the leaf. And I I was kind of like, I was like, this sounds cool, but I am unconvinced that this is realistic.
Anytime anybody says wireless with some kind of production, I'm just like, no,
Yeah, no, same.
don't
So I
go
was
there.
just sort of like, okay, cool. I'm like, I'm not sure this guy knows what he's getting into, and I forget exactly what I was like. Keep me posted. Like, some of that you might have to like, yeah, technically pare back a little bit on that. But so I just told him like, keep in touch with me, keep me posted. And I think I was kind of curious to just see like, yeah, is this project how's it gonna develop? But then yeah, no, by the middle of the next beginning of 2017, I saw like, oh, this is really going to be a thing. He'd gotten in touch with Symmetry Labs. They were working on it as well.
So Zach's not part of Symmetry Labs. Zach is
Zach
like
is
his
not.
own.
No, Zach just independently just kind of came up with this and just went out and formed a team around it.
That's cool, man. I don't think I know him. I'll have to meet him sometime.
Yeah, no, he's great. It's not, he doesn't do a ton of like he has a, full-time normal job in the tech industry, but has done sort of artistic things, odds and ends on the side. And this, I think, was yeah, his having been to Burning Man. I forget how many times he'd been before that, but I think then he had this like, okay, cool, I'm like time to make a thing happen. So
Yeah.
and he's really an excellent just like project manager and leader. Which I think is really, yeah. I mean, I thought he did a great. There were so many moving parts on this, and so many different people. Like, there's so many
Yeah,
people I
man,
haven't
that's a
even
huge,
listed.
that's
That
a core component to any project. Anything that rises above a certain level of complexity, it's like you have to have some kind of dispassionate manager to make sure the gears fit together. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of egos in a room, you know?
yeah, it's still always that, but as you say, yeah. Otherwise, it's just that.
Yeah, yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, no, and there's so many people. I can't even possibly mention everyone, but there's people that came on, so many volunteers that did the power system, people that assembled leaves, people that assembled just like gift leaves that we gave to donors, people that did the event programming. Sky Shlomo did the control board. It was just like the list is people that volunteered, to carpenters that constructed the base for the thing out there. It was just a crazy yeah, a crazy group effort that very much is one of those like only at Burning Man or only for Burning Man did this many people somehow come out of the woodwork and put in all this time and effort.
That's cool. But it
Yeah.
was your software. So you produced, what you call it, LS Studio?
Yeah, LX Studio is what I call it. Yeah, I've basically just been working on that for I guess she's almost like 10 years now. I think my first Burning Man was 2009, I want to say. And then I started the year after that. I was like, okay, cool, I'll dip into this light art thing. This seems interesting. My background was in software engineering, so that side of it felt very approachable to me, and I was just kind of curious to pick up a new hobby or creative interest at that time. So yeah, I just started putting together that year. I just did a simple, just kind of 2D grid of lights with yeah, just abstract algorithmic patterns running on it. And just since I've just basically like have this little pile of software that has just built up and up as I've done more in projects and gotten involved in various different pieces over the years since. And yeah,
Yeah, when I
those
was
sort
over
of
at Heron that time, you showed it to me briefly, but we got to make that happen, man. I want a demo. It's such cool software, and what you guys did with it is so amazing. I'm very much into volumetric lighting design, so that it's yeah. I've been curious about it ever since I saw the tree. Actually,
yeah.
before that, when I saw the cubes, I was like, "What are they using?"
Right. Yeah, it was essentially the same. Yeah, I'd been involved pretty early on with the first generations of the cubes when that was also grew out of a Burning Man project, sort of before Symmetry was formed into a company. And yeah,
Well,
that was
that's how I found
the
out
same
about
sort of
Symmetry
framework.
was through the Sugar Cubes installation.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to remember. I actually forget which year. I want to say it must have been 2011 or 12, maybe. Can't remember exactly, but yeah, way back
And
when.
that was Alex, right?
Yeah, that was Alex Green's brainchild. There was sort of the first year it didn't quite. I'm trying to remember exactly. I think 2011 there was sort of a V1 of it where the cubes were actually all. It was all like kind of just one standalone piece where the cubes were actually all welded together. It was all sort of just pieces of steel, so you couldn't like remove a single cube. It was a structure of cubes, but that really um, yeah, was completely welded and with LED strip kind of then sort of just tracing across the edges of all those cubes. But then the next year after that, he kind of redesigned the whole thing, switched to using a more where they actually became modular cubes that could be moved around. Each cube with its own with the LED strip sort of embedded within it. And
I saw them in their final
that's when it
form.
really became a thing.
Yeah, it's a really cool system. They still do anything with that? I remember for a while they were trying
Well,
to it was trying to be like a they were trying to rent it out, or make
yeah, definitely
basically
no, and they
stage
did. So
production pieces.
right after that, it became a company, and then they redesigned them yet again. There was a guy named Trip Vest who did a lot of the industrial design on that, and they made them like foldable, collapsible, single cable to hook into them. And yeah, they did for a while. They were renting those out, doing stage production with them. I'm not sure if there are any still in the wild. I think as we talked about a little yesterday, I think the company has folded at this point. I'm not sure what will happen with the existing. I actually don't know where the existing cubes like are, or if what will happen with them.
I'm
But
just
yeah.
really interested in the way that they were driving everything over power over Ethernet. Everything was
Hmm.
PoE. At
Yeah.
the end, it was a really cool, well designed modular system. So you said it
Yeah.
was a guy Tripp who did the industrial design.
Yep. And he's
That's cool,
he's
man.
still in San Francisco. He's always working on cool art and hardware projects. Great guy. Great guy. Like him a lot.
There's so many accomplished artists and designers in San Francisco. It blows my mind.
Yeah.
I mean,
No,
there
I
are
think as
accomplished
you
artists everywhere, but San Francisco is particularly dense.
yeah, I think that's right. What you were saying before about yeah, when you leave San Francisco and get this different perspective on it, I think that's one of the things that that also does strike. Usually, when I leave San Francisco, it's more like seeing all these blind spots San Francisco has, where it's like, oh, out in the world, people care about all these other things and what. But the flip side of that is then also realizing, like, whoa, there are a crazy number of people that are really good at this set of things in San Francisco. That, yeah, that is clearly extremely unique, and few other places where it exists to that degree.
Right. And even though a lot of there's been an outflow of underground artists from the city, there's still a real high density of professional artists who are designers or, um, yeah, I mean, they're artistic and creative in their work. And that personality has remained.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Cities are funny like that, man. Every city has its own personality. You know, San Francisco has a very unique feel to it, just like every city. But that's one of the reasons I really like traveling is because it's almost like getting to know a person, but you're getting to know like a collection of people, and it's interesting to see the differences.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think, and you feel yourself shift very quickly, or I do at least when I travel places. I just sort of observe how I guess subconsciously, I'll just realize, wow, I'm doing little things differently, and I don't feel like I ever made a clear decision that I was going to start doing this thing in this way. But I find it very interesting, yeah, to just
You
absorb that
drop
and
into the
observe.
flow.
Yeah, and then and that's how I often feel. I realize like, oh, I get it. That's coming from this place, or like that's something about, you often won't even know. It's like what specific cultural cue did I pick up on? I'm not sure, but I can see from my own behavior that it somehow happened. It's
Yeah.
very, yeah, it's very fascinating.
So for the last 3 months, I've been out in the British Virgin Islands doing a light art installation, and it's a very weird scene. I've never spent this much time in the Caribbean before, and it's essentially a developing nation. It's no offense to the British Virgin Islands, it's beautiful, but it's a different level of development than Europe or the Americas, and it's interesting. The pacing of life is very different. Everything takes a long time. Logistics are not tight, but that's a that's a it's a negative and a positive because it forces you to slow down. And I've just noticed my personality has gotten a lot slower in the last 3 months, which is
Hmm.
great. It's been relaxing. It's funny. I was talking to one of the guys that I'm crewing with, and we were saying if this coronavirus had hit while we were at home, I think it would have been a lot more jarring because when it hit, my life was already upside down. We were already out here living in this weird fantasy reality where we were basically already socially isolating. It's been me and the same four guys for the past 3 months, just working on this project every day. And I think if I was at home, it would have been even crazier because it would have been a complete disruption of the normal pattern of life. It must have been kind of like that for you in Amsterdam, right? You're just like, everything's changing, and then all of a sudden things started to change in this other way. And yeah,
Yeah, no, definitely. It is. Yeah, with that, I mean, the timing was both fortunate and unfortunate. We were sort of already wrapping our time up there, and we're going to be leaving within another month or two anyway. So we were kind of in a position to then we just sort of saw the weirdness coming and the travel ban starting, and we were like, we should maybe we should accelerate this a little bit. But I think what you said though is totally right though, of like what that experience is like is definitely a function of where you are. It was also sort of stark for us, I think, with the corona stuff had was clearly spreading across Europe, and already some big impacts being obviously felt and seen in Italy especially, and us having been in Europe for a while, I think there was a little more immediacy for us to that, just from being a bit closer to it. And it was fascinating, even just coming back to Canada and then seeing, just in the conversations we were having with people here, we were like, oh, like we're a week ahead on the sort of understanding how serious this is. And it was sort of like watching the same episode play again. We're like, okay, it's just going to take 7 more days, but then we can predict like what the tone of the news is going to become like here and how it's going to feel. And that's most, it's not exactly the same. I think it is also interesting to see how different places do respond slightly differently and have still maintain their own sort of cultural approach to it. But there also does seem to be a little bit of a timing playbook that it's just, I guess, to some degree, human nature of
that
how
comes back to
one
to
goes
a, to a
through it.
place's personality.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's really bizarre, man. Like the I've been reading the local news, and people are there's news articles in the newspaper about how this whole thing is a conspiracy to roll out 5G networks. And you're
Yeah.
like reading the newspaper, like, wow, man, like for real? But that's what's going on, and people it crisis brings out the idiosyncrasies and the eccentricities of a culture. You know what I mean? And it's interesting to watch the different cultures and the different leaders um, deal with this. Like their personalities become very stark and clear. You're like, oh yeah, Trump is an asshole, and all he cares about is the economy. Obviously,
Yeah.
Bolsonaro in Brazil, it's another great example. He's like, yeah, let the old people die as long as our economy doesn't crash. Canada, they've got their shit together. Flattening the curve. Same with the Bay Area. It seems like, yeah, it's just really interesting to watch the whole thing unfold.
Yeah. No, for sure. I think it also does remind me of, yeah, what we were talking about earlier with the sort of yeah, different what a place's sort of sense of urgency is, and kind of how you were saying, yeah, the Bay Area definitely has a bit of that. Like, you've got to be moving fast, or you'll be left behind. Always got to be in the midst of some kind of hustle type of thing. So there's from afar, I mean, I perceive you can, I guess, see some of that in the response. I actually am impressed with how it seems like they've gotten ahead of it about as much as anywhere in the United States. And
Oh, absolutely. But it's been a massive disruption.
oh, of course, yeah,
It
no,
was, especially in the early days of this, it was really crazy to just to be in touch with all my friends and the people back home, and to watch how everybody's life just stopped. And then everybody was like freaking out. And, at first, the natural instinct is to just kind of make light of it. You're just like, oh, like what is this? Like how it's a 2% death rate. It's like what could and then you start learning more and more, and you're like, wow, this is actually a very serious thing. But I think everybody went through that curve, the curve of realization, and places like the Bay, places like Italy, I'm sure, um, they had that wake up call real quick. Whereas for me, and maybe for you, I don't know what it was like in Amsterdam, but for me out here, it's just like, this is a bubble island, man. It's like even now, we're in quote unquote lockdown, but I think there's been like one case on this island, and the government freaked out and basically mandatory curfew for everybody for 6 days. So
hmm
we've been under quarantine for 6 days, but after that, from what I can tell, everything's just going to go back to normal, and we'll see what happens.
no, exactly. Time will tell. This is, it's a very fascinating worldwide experiment. I hate like expressing it in that terms, not to diminish from the amount the human tragedy of it, but yeah, when I'm able to separate from the intensity of that, it is a sort of like whoa, like when in our lifetimes never, I think, has the entire world all taken an approach to this one same thing at the same time, and all these subtly different approaches, and
I was
seeing
thinking about that the other day, how this is really the first global crisis that I think that our generation has ever experienced, and in that it's truly global. Like it is everywhere in the world, and everybody in the world is looking at the same thing right now, focused on the same issue, which is it's bizarre, especially coming out of like the media shit show that was, it's like you can't pay attention to anything for more than a couple days, and
hmm
now it's just gathered the collective consciousness of humankind, and we're like, nope, look at this. This is what's happening, and yeah, it is fascinating. It's I don't think there's anything wrong with looking at things top down and trying to abstract yourself. I don't think that belittles the suffering. I think it's important to put things into context, and to look at things in the big picture. It's important in the process of putting events into context. Do you know?
yeah, no, that's well said. Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think that's more what I meant, was like to doing both at once is very possible.
Yeah, man. Look at things like an alien. What would an alien say?
Yeah,
Like,
right.
look at these monkeys. Look at these monkey people.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know what they would say. Yeah.
So after this, are you going back to Heron? The Heron Arts is your studio in San Francisco.
Yeah. I mean, Heron we run as a gallery and sort of event space. And yeah, I mean that's on indefinite hiatus at the moment. Definitely
The
falls
studio
into
or
the
the events, you mean?
well,
Or
the
just your
it's
return?
really more of an event space. I mean, I do work out of there, but the space, it's more of a public event space. I produce my
I see.
music and work on some of my projects there, but yeah, I mean, I can kind of I do it from there, but I could do that from anywhere, with a computer and the stuff that I need. But yeah, no, I mean, it's the future, I guess, is unclear with that, as with everything else. We kind of just push the pause button on all the public side of that. It's I mean, the events we do are, the capacity is more 100 to 200, so we'll see when that size of a venue becomes viable again. So But yeah, no, in the meantime, when we get back to San Francisco, yeah, I'll just continue fortunately, most of, my individual work is on the computer. So I'm able to continue with that.
Are you what are you doing for work now? I know that it's one of the things I wanted to ask you about is you started with Facebook, you left Facebook, and you've kind of been full-time arting it from what it looks like to an outsider, to me, who
Yeah.
doesn't really know you that well. It seems like you've just been crushing it as a musician and a producer. I was listening to some of your tracks today, man. You are a very talented producer. Love your music.
Thanks, dude. Appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a hard question to answer. I'm kind of all over the place all the time. I mean, the short answer is I'm fortunate to, have enough financial security from the Facebook thing to be able to play around with that. But I'm kind of always dividing my time between sort of three major areas. So there's Heron Arts, the sort of public facing side of that, where we do roughly on a monthly schedule have art exhibitions, which will be a mixture of either community driven stuff where there are local artists or organizations that come in and do their thing in the space. My favorite example of that is a group called One Found Sound that we have in regularly. They're a local chamber orchestra, self-organized, so they'll do concerts. And then the other side of that is shows that we curate and produce. It's curator Tova Lobats that works with me on a lot of those. So that's one major thing. Then on the music front, yeah, I continue to DJ, produce electronic music, and run a dance music label called Manjumasi with one of my best friends, Atish Mehta, who used to live in San Francisco, lives in New York now. So that's kind of a mixture. And then I'm always just, producing music and putting out music, DJ mixes and releases. And then the third wing, is kind of the light art and the programming, where I'm either working as an artist on a specific project or working on the software framework side of it, which I obviously do use myself on my own projects, but also gets used by other artists sort of in the community and various other, mostly Burning Man projects, but also some other real world installations where people use that. So I
Yeah,
kind of
man.
just am in this.
When the lockdown ends, I want a full demo,
Yeah,
demo
no,
of your
for sure. I
software.
mean, I'm actually in lockdown mode of them. I kind of have been trying to focus on it a bit more at the moment because with sort of, all the other, especially with all the music stuff and events, that's all pretty much totally on pause at the moment. So I'm trying to make the most of it and just sort of say, okay, cool. Well, coding time, I guess. And hopefully, be able to make some, it's tough, it's like it's also a super distracted time. Like part of me feels like, oh, I should be able to be so productive during this time where everything's on pause, but that's a little bit of wishful thinking. That of course it's an incredibly distracted time as well with so much going on, but yeah, no, I have been trying to do quite a bit of work on that at the moment. So
That's
um
cool, man. I've been doing Rhino classes,
nice.
Rhino
Yeah.
3D.
Yeah.
It's a good excuse. A lockdown is a great focus for doing things that you don't generally have time for. Like I find I'm doing all of like meditated the other day. I've been working out a lot, just really concentrating on self improvement because there's nothing else to do,
Yeah.
especially out here,
Yeah.
which
Right.
is great.
Yeah, no, one hopes that I mean, yeah, it's fortunate for those of us that are in a situation, to be able to take that tack on it. But yeah, one hopes that some of that will be able to stick in some way if there is a silver lining.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure it will. I mean, you just got to take these lessons and move forward with them. So, what are you working on now? What
Um,
pieces are you working on, or what projects are you working on?
Yeah, mostly just working on the software at the moment. Most specifically for future editions of the tree. But I'm also kind of more generally just iterating on that software. To my goal is to sort of eventually get it to a point where it's could be more of a. Right now, it's sort of in between a creative professional application and a software developer toolkit. It sort of now kind of assumes that the person using it probably has at least some software engineering ability. But I would like to eventually get it to a point where that's not really a requirement and it could be used a bit more broadly. Um, I use the metaphor of digital audio workstations, programs like Ableton or GarageBand, that type of thing. So I've sort of been thinking about the arc of what I want to head towards being a digital lighting workstation, that's geared more for. There's obviously a lot of great programs out there for lighting. I find that when I got into doing light art, looking at what was out there, I could sort of see, oh, a lot of this comes from the sort of stage history with thinking about cue lists and going through a performance and
Well, that's traditional lighting software.
exactly,
That's the
that's sort of what it
paradigm.
grew out of. And I realized that I was coming at it from a different angle where I was like, oh, my background's in electronic music and I'm not really trying to put on a stage show here. I'm trying to make a piece of abstract algorithmic art that sort of is three-dimensional and develops over time. So
That's
that's
my
where I've
favorite
just been
paradigm
bringing
to
that
look at lighting software from. Looking at it, a light performance or a lighting piece, almost like a synthesizer track that you can build and morphs dynamically. You know what I mean? Like
completely.
I
Yeah.
I know the lighting cue paradigm because I came from the world of show production. But originally, I was coming from like a motion graphics perspective. So it was like timeline to cue stack, and then to now into more like the generative world of algorithmic um, pattern based lighting design.
Yeah, completely. No, that's exactly the experience that I had as well, where, well, without having any actual um, stage production experience, but yeah, just coming from that music angle and looking at it and being like, this is totally feels like a synthesizer to me. Um, and
You
particularly, I
know who
mean, in
else
the,
treats their software like that? Is this group called Play Modes. They're out of Barcelona,
mm,
and they're like an audio video band almost. But one of their instruments is a lighting synthesizer. They're light artists, but music is just as much of a part of their performance uh, as the musical aspect. And yeah, they just have a really unique way of approaching lighting design and light art, where the same tool that they use to produce the light patterns also produces the sounds that you're hearing. So it is so synchronized. It's all LFOs. It's all
yeah, no, exactly. LFOs are the main concept. That was like one of the first things I implemented when doing light. I was like, oh, I just want a ton of LFOs. Like LFOs will solve all the not solve, but they will, reveal
well, it's
all the
such a
cool
cool
artistic
paintbrush to
effects.
use.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
if you're not doing contextual visuals, I feel like there's a lot of emphasis placed on reproduction of imagery in commonly available lighting tools because everybody kind of comes at it through the pixel mapping paradigm,
Yeah.
right? Where a more the more artistic element of the light art genre or the lighting design um, mind frame that they're coming at it as a visual music instrument, you know.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, I think it's such a difficult trade-off. I mean, I've spent a lot of time thinking about it because if you're attempting to create anything sort of commercially viable or reusable, video is just so appealing because there's so many great tools that interoperate with it. There's so much great video content out there. It's very standardized. It's just super flexible. So I completely understand sort of, yeah, okay, maybe you have you have a sort of 3D lighting installation, but it's very tempting to figure out how to have the video, very impressive existing video tools work with it. But yeah,
Well, with
it's just
volumetric lighting,
well,
it's
that's where
different
it just
because
makes less sense. Yeah, but that's where it's like I see the temptation to get it to work, but yeah, I think for me, that was kind of what made working on this type of software interesting to me, was realizing, oh, these 3D sculptures, though, it's just kind of a different thing, and they're usually the individual pixels or the lighting fixtures are far enough apart that it's sort of sparse, and like it's just not a video at all. It doesn't really map to that concept in your brain when you experience it. It's kind of a different thing. So
It comes
Um,
down to content, right? It's like what is the most sensible way to produce content for the display that you're addressing. And
right.
if you're talking about a video wall, right, like a an X by Y, you know, rectangular arrangement of LEDs, then video makes perfect sense. But when you start to take LEDs or your display medium, your pixels, and arrange them arbitrarily in 3D space, then all of a sudden, using a two-dimensional plane or platter to serve your content doesn't make any sense anymore. And one of the things we have migrated to a software package called Smode, which is written by a French group, and it's a game engine. You know, it's
Hmm.
a game engine that allows you to do crazy things with particle effects and 3D content, and then map that onto a point cloud of pixels. And you can specify your point cloud by specifying where your pixels are in 3D space. Pull that out of Rhino or whatever. Um, but the thing that I'm really very interested in is unique ways to generate compelling content in three-dimensional space. And for me, it's all about abstract content. So I don't know. I'm very curious about your software, man. I want to play with it.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. I think, and that's exactly the challenge. It's like you do want to map out, yeah, the very specific physical nature of each project. And the thing that I've not yet figured out super, I mean, I have various ideas, but it's like how to make content that works well, that's portable across very different types of 3D installations. Because in my experience, I've found that the best stuff is always when it's sort of hand coded for the given installation, so where you know the exact how far things apart are, you know what the real world dimensions are, and how that maps to how big something feels,
Well, I
and
think
that's a
that's
lot of
natural.
fun. Yeah, no, and I
The more
enjoy doing
complex
that.
the display, the more custom your content has to be. It's just like projection mapping. You know, you can't come out with like a content pack for projection mapping because the content has to fit on the
Right,
surface.
exactly.
It's the
Yeah,
same thing with volumetric content. So
yeah,
having an environment that allows you, you know, like a workflow that allows you to create compelling content on the fly is very valuable.
yeah, no, for sure. And I think what's tough there is figuring out, for me, it's like trying to find the line between where to where to do that as a software engineer and where to just code things that are specific to a very precise artistic situation, versus thinking about, yeah, what's the right level where something can become just a tool with a UI that anyone can use. Because there's always a trade, of course, with like hand coding always retains the greatest flexibility, and you're going to be able to get the most specific effects for a given installation that way. But it obviously requires a lot more time, a lot more expertise. It Not as many people can use that, so it's limiting in that way, where not as much can be explored. So I think that's like the high level problem that I think about a lot with this, where these really
Well, what
3D
about like a
sculpture
node based
installations.
paradigm, right? Like,
Yeah, I've
I
seen
feel
more
like that's a
people
middle
doing this
ground.
now, using like TouchDesigner and that type of thing.
There's a lot
On
of software packages that use that paradigm to bridge the gap between straight code
Right,
and like a like a stack of code and more graphical. I'm not a coder. I don't write stacks of code, but I am very into node based programming environments like TouchDesigner because I think in signal flow, and when I
right.
look at those setups, I can very clearly visualize what I'm trying to do and figure out ways to do it through that environment.
Yeah, it's a funny trade-off, because I mean, yeah, they're definitely, it's a much more approachable programming environment, and they're usually built so that you can't, I mean, you can mess things up with it, but you usually can't crash the entire program unless you do something really wrong. But yeah, it's funny. I
You can
always,
definitely break them.
well, you can't. Yeah,
Depends,
I
but
mean, you can, you can certainly get not the result you intended. But I think it's funny because, yeah, I mean, I've done work in those environments, and as a software engineer, I actually often find node flow programming frustrating, because I often realize like, oh, I know exactly what I'm trying to do here, and I could just write the code to do it. And
Well,
sometimes
yeah, I mean,
creating the
you've got the
structures,
wizard skills, you know.
yeah. But it's fun.
You can
But I
cast
think
the
that's
magic spells,
what's
man.
funny about. At the same time, I can appreciate that. Yeah, this nodes. It's much more approachable and it's much more comprehensible for a much wider audience. But it's figuring out exactly like figuring out what the right level is for those abstractions is always the. That's the always really tricky bit of it. So yeah, but I'm generally positive on those. I've done a lot of work in another project I'm involved in San Francisco. Actually, is called Envelop, which is an ambisonic immersive sound space that also has a lighting component synchronized with the audio, and we use Max and Max for Live to build the tools for that power the spatialization of sound. And yeah, working on that, it's a very it's a love hate for me, where it's been really fun and really quick to build using those tools. But yeah,
Working with
definitely.
Max, you mean?
Yeah, where it's quick, the flow programming thing makes sense, but I definitely have my moments where I'm like, man, if I could just write this in normal code, it would be which I could, of course, but would come with all these other costs of needing the especially with Max's integration, the Max for Live integration in Ableton is really great. Makes it very easy for us to distribute those tools and makes it very easy for other people to use them. So it's the right choice for that project for those reasons. Doing custom software would make it a lot more complex and harder for people to work with and work on. But yeah,
Yeah,
no,
I
it's
used
I
to
mean
use
that
Max
it's
MSP
there's never been
back
a
in
better time. The amount of tools out there now, it's pretty incredible.
it really is, man. And I feel it. I feel like right now, the breadth of tools that's available for doing custom to develop custom tool like tools that allow you to build tools
Yeah, meta tools
have
are the new tools.
yeah, it's really blossomed, and it's pretty cool to see TouchDesigner becoming massively adopted. I went to the TouchDesigner summit a couple years ago. It was back in 2017 in Berlin, I think. I'm probably wrong about that, but it was either 2017, 2018. It was amazing to see how many people turned up and the variety of professions that were interested in TouchDesigner and what they were using it for. And you build whatever you want. You build a lighting console. You can build anything.
Yeah, no, it's super cool. Do you actually know? I don't know the backstory of the company. I'm curious what their like what they initially built it for, what the earliest applications were.
And derivative, it was a video. It was focused on like motion graphics and video. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's from what I understand. That was the origin story of derivative and TouchDesigner. It's a fairly old platform. Like it's
Yeah,
been around for over 10 years.
yeah, no, I think, and that's what's cool about a lot of these things is you realize they feel like all of a sudden they're big and popular and everyone's using it. But yeah, whenever you dig, you typically find out, oh, someone's been working on this thing for a long time, actually refining the concepts and the ideas. And but yeah, no, it's yeah, that one definitely. It is cool to see how many things it's addressing now, which was yeah, kind of why I brought that up, because I was like, when they first started making this, I'm sure it was I'm sure they were not imagining just how many different things it would end up being used for. It's very cool.
Yeah, well, I was talking to Matthew Reagan, who was one of uh, Obscura's lead developers. I think he left the company at this point, but I'm not positive about that. But he's been a part of the TouchDesigner community for a very long time. That's how Obscura found him and scooped him up. He was like making
Mm,
tutorial videos out of college for derivative, and to see what Obscura did with TouchDesigner is pretty amazing. In fact, White Void's system is all based on TouchDesigner, I believe, as well, which is pretty cool.
yeah,
You know,
very
it's
cool. Yeah,
like White Void's system is all about kinetics. You know, it's expressing waveforms uh, through three-dimensional arrays of motors,
Yeah.
and then you look at Obscura, and their thing is all three-dimensional projection of content, and to get that out of the same package is pretty crazy.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. The kinetic stuff's always been really interesting to me and on my wish list. I mean, my if I had way more time than I do, I would love to get into playing with something in that arena. But
Well, it's interesting because now there's a lot of motors. We actually almost did a project last year that used arrays of DMX controllable winches,
mhm.
which I was really excited about the concept because you can control those with a um, as if it was a grayscale light.
Yeah, no,
If you think
exactly. It's
about,
just another ArtNet destination.
yeah, it's just another dimension in the DMX flow, and you can treat the XY, you can treat the amount of release that your motor is giving as just another gradient.
Yeah. Yeah, I worked on one project that did this a couple years ago at Burning Man. The Fold House Collective did a project called Radiolumia, where yeah, we sort of modified the LX Studio software to have an additional. They had these sort of umbrellas that could be programmed to open and close with light strips on them, and did it exactly as you described, just sort of as an additional acted as if it
Just
were
one more
additional
parameter.
lighting channel that's being animated the same way that you would animate a color, but just in this dimension of open close. And it was super fun, very cool. But yeah, a lot of, I mean, they built those, that was done the very Burning Man way with a sort of custom little control board and motors and everything. So I think, that's what I think that's, it's an interesting meta problem. I think with a lot of this light and interaction art is there's often what I see is there's two ends of the spectrum. There's the very DIY, you're down to go build these things and do hardware boards and electrical engineering, or you got to go for like really professional, really expensive products that exist on the market that are usually, for serious stage or theater applications, but that are sort of unapproachable if you're a hobbyist, or if you're just like, hey, I have this cool idea, I want to mess around with it, but am I going to buy 16 winches at, however much a pop? It sort of doesn't make sense if you don't have an actual. And that's one thing I'm curious to see evolve in this whole space, because it's still with lighting. I've watched that kind of change over the past 10 years where the DIY stuff is both getting less tricky, like whereas you used to really have to know how to um deal with Arduinos and all this kind of stuff, but there's getting to be
It was
offerings
very low
on the DIY
level.
end that are, it was very low level, but now there's starting to be more and more packages that make that a lot easier, much more approachable. And at the same time, on the other end, the professional gear, as with most things, gets less expensive slowly over time, and you don't need to spend the crazy amounts of money you maybe once would have had to. So it's cool to see that collapse. I expect as that happens to see a lot more cool artistic output emerge from that, just as a broader number of people can decide, hey, actually I'm going to go experiment with that, and there's a way in. So the kinetic stuff I view as probably being a little earlier on that curve, where it's still either really hard work or very expensive to set up, but hopefully
I
we'll
just
see
don't
the
think. I
same
think
thing
it's
happen.
less approachable. It's there's not the amount there's not the same amount of hardware that's pre-built to make it accessible. So it's still very low level.
Yeah.
There are companies that make great winch systems, but there's also less. They're more of a niche application. I feel like they are anyway.
Yeah, for
It's
sure. Well, and when I'd last looked into it, I was trying to find some, but I realized, well, the winches that are commercially available are being built to crazy safety standards because they're usually being used on a real set in a theater, and they're often holding something heavy. And if this thing messes up, somebody potentially gets seriously injured,
You
which is
haven't been on
great. Of course,
Alibaba
you want that
recently.
for any commercial project. But then I was sort of like, oh, well, if I'm just trying to like screw around with making a little art installation, holding up some lights that are moving or something, like definitely don't actually need that degree of safety, but completely understand that, yeah, well, it's difficult for anyone to commercially design
Oh,
and sell me a sort of medium safe thing for it creates there's a strange
go on Alibaba. China's making
that's true, yeah, I could
some
find if I
pretty
put a little time
affordable
digging.
winches.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put anything heavy over my head with them, but
Right.
you know, they'll lift your lights, and they're made for that.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna hit you up after this and get some links off you.
Yeah, absolutely, man, absolutely. Um, well, I think that we should probably wrap it up in the next couple minutes. Um, but yeah, this has been a really, really good, interesting conversation. I'm glad that we got a chance to jam.
Yeah, likewise, man. Really fun talking shop.
Yeah, absolutely. When I get back into the Bay, well, when the crisis is over, let's
Yeah.
hang out again.
Yes, for sure.
Let's
Yeah,
go get a
we'll
drink.
see which one of us makes it back there first. It's not even clear at this point.
Yeah, no, that's definitely it's a thing. It's definitely a thing. All right, man. Well, thanks again.
Yeah,
I
totally.
will.
Thanks for having me,
I'll
dude.
talk to you soon.
Yeah, definitely be in touch.
All right, brother. Bye.
Bye bye.